I never thought I'd start my 30th birthday reading my own obituary. The sunlight was just starting to spill through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, soft gold pooling across the polished oak floors. I was still in my champagne-colored silk robe, hair tied up in a loose bun, waiting for the espresso machine to finish its slow, steady hum. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, I thought it was the usual friends texting birthday wishes, maybe a few work messages I could ignore until after coffee. But then I noticed the flood of missed calls. 27. From everyone, my best friend Melissa, my old college roommate Hannah, even Mark from accounting, who hasn't texted me in years. When I finally opened Facebook, I froze. There it was. A post from my mother's account, with my father tagged. A smiling photo of me from high school, captioned, "R.I.P. to our daughter. We will miss you forever." My chest tightened. I read it twice, 3 times, as if maybe I'd misread the words. The comment section was chaos. Friends asking what happened. Former classmates expressing shock. A few distant relatives already writing long, dramatic goodbyes. It had to be a joke. And knowing my parents, it was. But jokes are only funny when the history behind them isn't soaked in old wounds. My coffee was ready, but I didn't move to pour it. I just stood there, the cool marble of the kitchen counter under my fingertips, scrolling through the post, feeling the familiar sting crawl up my throat. I hadn't spoken to my parents in over 3 years. And now, on the morning I was supposed to feel powerful and accomplished, they had managed to drag me right back into the past. The last time I saw my parents' faces in person, I was 22, standing in the middle of their living room in Dayton, Ohio, holding a single suitcase. I'd just told them I was moving to New York. Not to work at the insurance office my dad's friend had lined up for me. Not to stay in town, get a sensible job, and eventually marry someone from the neighborhood like they wanted. I was going to pursue a career in architecture, a dream I'd been clinging to since I was 12, sketching city skylines in the back of my math notebook. "You're out of your mind, Emily," my mother said, arms crossed over her chest. "Nobody's going to pay you to draw buildings. You're going to come crawling back in 6 months." My dad didn't even look at me when he muttered, "If you think you're too good for the life we've given you, go ahead. See how far that gets you." It wasn't the first time they'd dismissed me, but something about that moment, the way my mom's voice dripped with sarcasm, the way my dad's eyes stayed fixed on the TV, made it clear they weren't just doubting me. They'd already decided I'd fail. The lump in my throat burned, but I refused to let them see me cry. My hands shook as I zipped up my suitcase. Only one person in that house had a different expression, my grandmother, Eleanor. She was sitting in the recliner by the window, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun, her bright blue eyes fixed on me. When I passed her to leave, she reached for my hand. "Here," she whispered, pressing a small brass key into my palm. It was attached to a simple leather keychain, worn soft from years of use. "It's from my old desk." I kept it to remind myself I always had the power to open my own doors. Her hand squeezed mine. "Don't come back until the life you want is the life you have." I swallowed hard, slipped the key into my pocket, and walked out. It was late afternoon when I stepped onto the bus bound for New York. The sun was setting over the Ohio fields, streaking the sky in orange and purple, and I told myself out loud, so I couldn't take it back, they'll regret underestimating me. And for years, that brass key was the only thing I carried that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could prove them wrong. New York was louder, harsher, and lonelier than I'd imagined. I rented a tiny studio in Queens, the kind of place where you could wash dishes, cook dinner, and answer the door without taking more than 2 steps. The paint peeled near the ceiling. The radiator made strange clanging noises in the middle of the night. But it was mine. The first job I landed wasn't glamorous. Drafting assistant at a small architectural firm run by a wiry, sharp-eyed woman named Linda Carver. She was in her late 50s, with a wardrobe full of black turtlenecks and a voice like gravel, and she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're green," she said, flipping through my portfolio on my first day. "But I like how you think. You'll either survive here, or you won't. Your call." I survived. Those first 2 years were brutal. I worked 12-hour days, often staying late to teach myself new design software or redraft blueprints until they were flawless. I learned how to navigate client meetings where my ideas were dismissed, until Linda stepped in and said, "She's right, and here's why." That small act of backing me up became fuel I burned for months. Money was always tight. I ate $1 pizza for dinner more times than I can count. My winter coat came from a thrift store, and the zipper stuck halfway up. But every time I felt the doubt creeping in, I'd fish out my grandmother's brass key from my bag and run my fingers over the worn leather. 3 years in, things started to shift. I landed my first big independent project, a boutique hotel in Brooklyn that wanted a bold, modern vision. I poured myself into it, sketching concepts on the subway, in coffee shops, even in bed at night. When the ribbon was cut, and my design stood gleaming under the afternoon sun, my name was in the local paper for the first time. I didn't tell my parents. In fact, I went out of my way to keep them in the dark. My Facebook was a carefully curated wall of vague updates, a photo of a latte here, a shot of Central Park there, nothing that hinted at my career or success. Let them think I was still scraping by. By 28, I'd opened my own firm, Carver and Lane Architects, named in honor of Linda, who had become both my mentor and my fiercest advocate. The first year was a blur of contracts, clients, and constant travel. My designs were featured in Architectural Digest. I bought a penthouse overlooking the East River, a place where the walls were lined with my own framed blueprints and the kitchen counters were marble, the kind I used to only see in glossy magazines. But still, I stayed silent with my family. I didn't know if it was pride or protection or both. The brass key sat in a glass case on my desk now, right beside my first business card. I'd built the life I wanted, the life my grandmother told me not to return without. And I had done it without a single ounce of help from the people who'd told me I couldn't. 2 days after the RIP post, my parents showed up at my office. No call, no warning, just the receptionist buzzing my line and saying, "There's a Mr. and Mrs. Lane here to see you." They said they're family. Family. The word felt heavy in my chest. I could have told her to send them away. I thought about it, even reached for the phone to say exactly that. But then I caught sight of my reflection in the black glass of my office window, the tailored navy suit, the gold pendant at my collarbone, the calm, steady expression I'd learned to wear in negotiations. "Send them in," I said. When they walked through the door, it was like stepping into a different lifetime. My mom's hair was shorter now, streaked with more gray. My dad had gained weight, his once crisp posture softened. They looked around with a kind of half-curious, half-judgmental eyes I remembered from childhood, as if they were trying to decide whether to be impressed. I stayed seated behind my desk, letting them take it all in. The office was a statement in itself. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River, shelves lined with architectural awards, walls hung with framed blueprints of projects I'd designed. A low table in the corner displayed copies of Architectural Digest and Forbes, each with my name in bold print. "This is nice," my mom said, drawing out the word like it tasted strange. "I didn't know you worked in a place like this," my dad added, as if I were an employee instead of the owner. "I don't work here," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I built this. This is my firm, Carver and Lane Architects." The silence that followed was almost satisfying. My mom blinked twice, as if trying to recalibrate the conversation. "So, you're doing well. Well enough to employ 40 people, design projects across the country, and turn down clients I don't want to work with," I said evenly. "Well enough to own this building." Their eyes darted to each other. I could read it on their faces, the disbelief, the awkward attempt to mask it with polite smiles. My dad cleared his throat. "We didn't mean any harm with that post. It was just a joke." I folded my hands on the desk. A joke that had people calling me in tears, thinking I was dead. A joke that, given our history, feels a lot like the same old ridicule, just wrapped in social media likes. My mom's cheeks flushed pink. "We didn't think it would blow up like that." "Of course you didn't," I said quietly. "Because you've never really thought about how your words land. You've never thought about what they cost me." I stood, walked around to the front of the desk, and leaned against it so I was facing them directly. You wanted to see me as a failure. That's why you kept your version of me frozen in the past, the girl who'd run back home begging for help. That girl doesn't exist anymore. They didn't speak. They just sat there, hands folded, glancing at the awards, the view, the office that screamed, "I made it without you." "Why are you here?" I finally asked. My dad shifted uncomfortably. "We thought maybe after the post, we should check on you." I smiled without warmth. "Well, now you've checked. And you can see I'm not dead. In fact, I've never been more alive." I let the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. "Since you're here," I added, "we might as well talk about what comes next." I walked over to the small conference table in the corner of my office and gestured for them to sit. They obeyed without a word, like they knew this wasn't going to be a casual catch-up. I poured 3 glasses of water from the crystal carafe, not because I was trying to be hospitable, but because I wanted them to feel the weight of the moment. The clink of the glass against the tabletop sounded louder than it should have. "You want to be part of my life again?" I asked, taking my seat across from them. "There are conditions." My mother frowned. "Conditions?" "Yes," I said simply. "Because the way things were before, that's never happening again." I looked first at my dad. Condition 1, respect my choices. Even if you don't understand them, even if you think you know better. No more sarcasm disguised as concern. No more subtle digs at my career or my lifestyle. His jaw flexed, but he didn't argue. I turned to my mother. Condition 2, accountability. That post you made? You're going to delete it. And then you're going to make a public post clarifying that it was a cruel mistake, not a joke. You're going to apologize, not just to me, but to everyone you scared. Because words matter, and you've never once had to own yours. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded once. Condition 3, I said, leaning forward, is for both of you. If you want to be in my life, you're going to do something meaningful with yours. You've spent years criticizing from the sidelines while never chasing anything yourselves. That stops now. Find something that gives you purpose, a job, a cause, a skill. I don't care what it is, but it has to be yours, not borrowed from me or anyone else. They exchanged a glance, like the request was foreign to them. "Why does that matter?" my dad asked cautiously. "Because," I said, "people who are fulfilled don't try to tear others down. You can't build a relationship with me if you're still operating from the same bitterness that made you doubt me in the first place." They didn't answer. I sat back, letting the words sink in. "I'm willing to give you a chance. Not for the people you've been, but for the people you could become. But if you cross a single one of these lines, if you even start to go back to the way things were, you're out. And this time, there won't be another chance." The air between us felt sharp, like it could cut skin. Finally, my mom whispered, "We'll try." I nodded. Trying is a start. But understand, I don't need you. I'm offering you this because I want to, not because I have to. For the first time in my life, I watched my parents sit across from me without a single ounce of power over me. And in that quiet, I realized just how much had shifted. The weeks that followed were strange. True to their word, my parents deleted the post. My mother even wrote a short apology on Facebook, stiff and awkward, but public. "We made a terrible mistake with an insensitive joke," she wrote. "Emily is very much alive, and we're proud of the woman she's become." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Every so often, I'd get updates. My dad had started volunteering at a local community center, teaching basic carpentry to teenagers. My mom joined a ceramics class at the library and sent me a photo of her first lopsided bowl. The messages were hesitant, almost shy, as if they weren't sure if I wanted to see them trying. And I did. I just didn't say it out loud. One Sunday afternoon, I found myself sitting at my desk, the city skyline spread out in front of me. The brass key sat in its glass case, catching the light. I picked it up, the leather warm from the sun, and closed my fingers around it. I thought about my grandmother, the way she'd pressed that key into my hand and told me not to come back until the life I wanted was the life I had. I'd kept that promise. And yet, somewhere along the way, I'd learned that independence didn't have to mean total isolation. That sometimes letting people earn their way back in was its own kind of strength. The next time my parents came to visit, it wasn't in my office. It was at my apartment. I cooked dinner, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and when they arrived, I noticed they looked lighter. We talked about safe things. Work. Weather. My mom's ceramics class. My dad's volunteer work. It was clumsy, like learning a new language, but there was no edge in their voices. As they were leaving, my mom hugged me, a real hug, the kind that lingers for a second longer than expected. My dad squeezed my shoulder and said, "We'll see you soon." When the door closed, I stood there for a moment, the quiet of my apartment wrapping around me. I slipped the brass key back into its case and smiled to myself. Some people have to bury parts of themselves to survive. And some of us, well, we bury the version they thought we'd always be. So maybe, in a way, they were right on my birthday. The old me? She's been gone for years.